That's how we can simulate it. To create a simulation is really not all that difficult, because if all the input comes from NASA and goes to NASA, and you knew that was the case, all Apollo communications were handled from and to NASA, so they had complete control.
Once the astronauts had been launched, it was no longer possible to verify the authenticity of any communication. In the case of major news stories here on Earth, journalists witness and comment on news events, and reports have to be confirmed before going to press. The Apollo communication links were controlled by none other than NASA itself. In these circumstances, how could we know for sure that the images from NASA were those of events that were actually occurring at that moment? Given the unique distribution method reserved for this region of Australia, was that Coke bottle incident a very discreet marker on the official record, a blow on the whistle that at the time would go undetected by Houston? What was really involved in the lunar surface photography? How would the Apollo pictures be taken by the astrophotographers?
Typically, they either had a table of settings for certain subjects at certain sun angles, or it was usually presented as a wheel or a circle, a clock face if you like, where for a given shutter speed they would have a series of apertures around the sides of the dial instead of 1, 2, 3 o'clock, etc.
But how were the necessary adjustments made so they could be sure of obtaining the correct exposures?
They had a lot of practice so they could feel what the setting was, because once on the moon, on the lunar surface, in the dress, in the life support system, you couldn't see the camera. They couldn't bend their head that far down to see the scales. Maybe they could see the aperture scale, which was in the front, but not the rest. They had no viewfinder, they had to aim by moving their body.
They had to effectively guess where they were pointing the camera, but since they were using a wide-angle lens on the lunar surface, it wasn't really too much of a guess, because broadly pointing the camera fixed to their chest in the direction, they would encompass the subject in which they were interested.
I'm going to run off a couple, John.
Either where the sun is shining on what they want to see.
Houston has that field of view.
Our own research has ascertained that composing pictures under these conditions and getting the camera pointing in the right direction isn't actually that easy.
Neil, this is Houston. The field of view is okay. We'd like you to aim it a little bit more to the right, over.
Here, the TV camera couldn't be lined up on the Apollo 11 LEM without assistance from base. Even with Houston's essential guidance, lining up the camera is obviously very difficult to achieve.
I'll start working on the shoulder.
A little bit too much to the right. Can you bring it back left about 4 or 5 degrees? Roger, you look okay as far as distance goes, Neil, and we'll line you up again when you finish the panorama. You're going too fast on the panorama sweep. You're going to have to stop for a final orientation. We'd like it to come left about 5 degrees, over.
So we wonder how they managed to take such good, well-composed, studio-quality pictures using the Lunar Hasselblad without a viewfinder and without Houston to guide them when lining up the camera.
Back to the right about half as much.
Okay.
Okay, that looks good there, Neil.
Was it intended that they should change lenses, filters and magazines outside, with the potential of dropping them into the dust, rendering them unusable?
So once they went out, they had one set for this particular mission, and then they went back in, changed whatever they needed to change, for instance film magazines or lenses, and then they went out again.
Okay, Houston, I'm going to change lenses on you.
Roger, Neil.
But going inside each time is not what actually happened. These operations took place outside the LEM.
Okay, Houston, tell me, get a new picture.
Neil, this is Houston. That's affirmative. We're getting a new picture. You can tell it's a longer focal length lens.
think they got to rush through what we've got.
Okay, magazine delta is working. And I'm starting with frame count number, about 1. Okay.
There was always a problem with these things, remember, because they were wearing these very awkward gauntlets.
These already difficult manipulations of the camera equipment, like this and this. Wearing these pressurized gauntlets, it would have been virtually impossible to bend the fingers and grab hold of a magazine slide, change lenses or whatever else. There were no oversized tabs on the camera to make adjustments, and only normal size scales.
The gloves were built that they couldn't grip anything smaller than about an inch. They had very bad feeling on the fingertips.
Were these thimble-tipped pressurized gloves, or rather gauntlets, actually the ones used? In the TV footage, these gauntlets looked totally unpressurized and more like sturdy gardening gloves. Using unpressurized gardening-type gloves would explain how the astronauts in the TV coverage managed to manipulate the Hasselblad and imaging equipment.
And even supposing that their gloved fingers dealt efficiently with these technicalities, remembering that the Apollo 11 moonwalk was very brief and that the Hasselblad actually had no viewfinder, how did they manage to get such professionally composed pictures? Pictures that resemble the classic pack shots we see created by the top advertising agencies.
Here we're into the realms of the seeing eye. Undoubtedly, there were some of the astronauts who, despite all of the pressures on them, and the fact you're wearing a helmet and a visor and you can't look through a nice screen or viewfinder at all, could see a picture when it occurred to them.
This picture from Apollo 15 can only be described as a good example of a typical advertising pack shot. Everything is perfectly arranged to sell the product. In this instance, that product is NASA's program. We have the astronaut filled in with light, so we don't get a rather disappointing and ghastly silhouette. He's standing just adjacent to the American flag, beautifully backlit and glowing, planted so that it slightly overlaps the lem, thus leading the eye across the picture. And of course the lem just happens to be photographed in such a way that its promotional logo is towards the camera. The rover itself then slightly overlaps the lem, delivering altogether an excellently composed picture, in no way consistent with the mere snapshot of random objects. Such an excellent image would be ideal for future use as general publicity, and in fact was used subsequently for posters and postcards. This is emphatically not a casual photograph of a saluting astro colleague who just happened to be standing, as luck would have it, in the right place at the right moment. This is a planned setup, in our view, and would have taken a highly professional photographer several hours to get right in the fully equipped environment of a studio. Now let's look at some more inconsistencies in the shadows present in the Apollo imagery. We're going to consider the shadow allegedly produced by Armstrong when collecting a contingency sample. The sun angle should have been just over 10 degrees above the horizon during this action. Compare that image with this Apollo 12 scene. Here the shadow is much longer than Armstrong's, but as the sun was at a higher angle of 15 to 16 degrees during their EVA, the shadow in this picture should actually be shorter than Armstrong's, had these pictures been taken, as claimed, in natural sunlight on the moon. In this TV coverage of Apollo 14, the astronaut is moving away from the camera, the thin pole shadow in the foreground. As he progresses towards his colleague, watch his shadows do some really strange things.
The Q-bay door is open. Pulled a little stiffer than I expected in 16G.
Looking good though, Ed, and you all are within 9 minutes of the timeline.
These variations in shadow length are consistent with moving away from, or nearer to, a large superlight, placed close to the subject, as we'll show in a moment. Here again is Apollo 11. This time it's Armstrong and Aldrin standing together. But their two shadows grow to completely different lengths. The nearer one of them moves towards the light source, the longer their shadow becomes. Such an effect has nothing to do with their relative heights and everything to do with moving to and from a superlight. Remember, the landing site was supposed to have been on flat terrain, the Sea of Tranquility. Consider carefully the difference in lengths of these two shadows. To show that this effect is consistent with moving towards or away from an artificial light source, here is a demonstration we set up in our London studio. This increase in shadow length cannot occur in natural sunlight on a flat surface. Note also in this scene the position of the American flag. We know from the official record that the astronauts did not touch the flag again once erected. We also know that this flag was artificially supported along the top in order to give it substance in the airless and motionless lunar environment. Now look at this flag, later in the same mission. How can it be that the top edge of the flag is now supported from the mast at a totally different and increased angle, unless it was unofficially altered on the set?
Could these two differing flag positions from Apollo 11 be a form of semaphore, signalled to us by whistleblowers? Once again, here is the message of the passage of time, symbolised by erect and drooping flags. Undoubtedly, there would have been serious repercussions for future manned space travel if the named astronauts were to die or to be seriously irradiated on the moon.
Discontinuity involving flag setups wasn't restricted to Apollo 11. As you can see in this footage from Apollo 16, the US flag is being taken out of the LEM before the TV camera pans around to the right to follow the astronaut as he proceeds to the site chosen for the all-important erection of the flag. As the camera continues its pan round to the right, we should expect to see the astronaut fixing the pole into the ground and adjusting the stiffened flag to its most attractive angle. However, when we get there, the flag has already been planted and the astronaut is leaving the scene. You can see his shadow in the bottom right as he departs from the frame. Truly a giant leap for all mankind, for in order to carry out this task, the astronaut has had to arrive at the location, select the most likely soft spot in a totally unknown surface, hammer in the lower part of the flag mast, insert the upper part of the mast and its attached flag, perhaps adjust the folds, and only then remove himself from the scene. All this while wearing the most cumbersome of gear, a pressurized spacesuit and the Pliss, the life-supporting backpack. According to this piece of footage, Apollo 16 achieved this list of things to do in a mere 69 seconds. A mere 69 seconds. This is the setting for the famous jump salute we analysed previously, with its designer continuity error.
There's that picture, which I'm sure many people will have seen, of an astronaut, I think it's Jack Schmitt as I recall, with the US flag sloping because of the wide angle effect of the lens somewhat, pointing towards the Earth, which is at the point of the triangle. Now that is an extremely well observed image.
What's that? I want to get the Earth. Oh, okay. Let me get over on this side. I don't think it's going to... They're a little close, maybe. Have them both in focus. That might do her.
This picture is supposedly the outcome, the instant when the camera clicked. Remembering that there was no viewfinder, how was the photographer sure of including the Earth, the essential element in this photo? But that is not our prime gripe with this example. The flag itself is the giveaway. The loudest whistleblow is in the manner in which the flag's been adjusted. We can see quite clearly in this still image that the edge of the US flag is billowing positive, that is, bulging towards the stills camera. And therefore, the edge of the flag should be billowing negative or bulging away from the TV camera. Yet when we view the TV coverage, this flag is billowing positive, towards the TV camera. Now that situation cannot be correct. It's a demonstration that this flag has been adjusted between the creation of the TV sequence and the still session. As no such adjustment has been recorded for posterity by the eyewitness TV camera, we can only conclude from the evidence that the TV coverage and photographic pictures recording this single event from Apollo 17 were actually imaged at different times, before and after. Does the intentional rearrangement of this flag merely indicate the duality of the NASA never a straight answer records? Or does another message lie in the subject matter of the picture? Perhaps this composition of astronaut looking down at the camera and the flag pointing up to Earth encode no departure from Earth for the named astronaut in this photograph?
Returning for a moment to the first mission, Apollo 11, and that classic image of Aldrin standing on the lunar surface, a picture often hijacked for commercial purposes, where then is the Hasselblad portrait of Armstrong, the very first human being to set foot upon another planet? Why have we no such picture?
I have it on first-hand account that the question was, well, now let's look at the best, first of all, for the best set of pictures of Neil. And then the faces tended to drop somewhat, and by the end they were saying, well, let's find any picture of Neil. And in fact there was only one there, which was Neil Armstrong, really a fair amount in the distance, working around the lunar module, which Buzz Aldrin had taken during part of a pan sequence, a geological pan sequence, which was called for in the photographic plan. Now, nobody cottoned on to the fact that nobody was taking a picture of Neil Armstrong, so that all the pictures which are seen on the covers of Life and now in the history books, they're all of Aldrin, which, you know, is fine, they're super pictures, but surely that you want a picture also of, at least, of the first man on the moon. It's just like, you know, Columbus having an artist, theoretically, and the artist busily sketching the palm trees the other way when Columbus steps onto the shore of the New World. History has no record.
It's very hard to believe that during preparation of the tasks to be performed, the NASA PR machine ignored this rather major detail, the planting of the first footprint. Especially as every single action and image had been planned in advance and rehearsed until it became automatic. Surely such a major omission would have been noticed and corrected before departure. And in the light of Armstrong's virtually reclusive post-mission behaviour, we can ask if the astronaut had personal reasons for being camera shy. Did he then, and does he now, feel some sort of guilt? Was he, in fact, never actually on the moon?
He's always been very helpful, but always struck me as being extremely businesslike. He responded to the point, he helped, and then that was it. So, quite typical.
Given the many crucial anomalies and inconsistencies we're unearthing in the Apollo imagery, we also have to ask again if Armstrong's central reason for avoiding the lens has to do with NASA's chosen procedures during the making of Apollo.
He was a very private individual, obviously, and since he has always kept himself very much to himself. During the various celebrations he's tended to appear, but it's as limited as possible, and if you might almost say decency allows.
Perhaps the Apollo space program would be better titled The Sound and Light Show, for what we actually hear or don't hear on the soundtracks is often inconsistent with both physics and the facts as presented to us. Just listen to this soundtrack as a bobsleigh team races down the famous Samaritz Bob Run. You can hear the pilot announcing the names of the corners they're negotiating.
This is the course called Gold. Next will be Snake 1 and Snake 2. And now is Sunny, Mesh and Dixon. And then is coming